I think we'll get started. I want to start on time because we have people joining us virtually, so I want to be considerate of their time as well. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Hope you can hear me. I can hear me. And if you want to come down a little, it'd be great. We don't have a full house, so let's be intimate. I have a short presentation, shouldn't take more than 5 or 10 minutes, and then we're going to open it up for questions and discussion. See here. So my name is Victor Gottzman. I am a performing arts management consultant. I work on performing arts development projects around the country. I've also been an executive director of producing and presenting organizations. So I have a lot of experience with how these places operate, some of the challenges that are inherent on their development. And I've worked with a lot of communities similar to Hoover and really appreciate being here. My colleague, Teresa Koberstein, is with us virtually. Can you hear me, Teresa?
Yep, can hear you great. Hi, everyone. Can hear you great.
Teresa's also had a lot of experience with the development of performing arts spaces in communities, with colleges, universities, producing, presenting organizations. And we're both really excited to be here with you at Hoover and at this exciting time for the development of a Hoover Center for the Arts. So we were brought in earlier this year to work on a project that's been, I guess, percolating in the community for quite some time. We've heard from the cultural sector, civic leaders, other stakeholders about the interest in developing a Center for the Arts for Hoover. We've talked about the need for that and what's missing in the area. And our work is really centered on what this place might look like, how it would operate, what's the governance structure, what's the staffing structure, what size it would be. We're part of a team. My colleagues, Michael Ferguson and Matt from Live Design are here. Also, we're part of a larger team of architects and theater planners that our role is pretty much revolved around the operational aspect of these places and how they will function, how much they will cost to operate, how much money is needed to underwrite the operation and that sort of thing. So this town hall meeting is part of a larger community engagement process where we've talked to individual stakeholders, small group discussions about the needs of the community, what's missing, where people go for cultural activities. We talked to the folks here at the Library Theater quite a bit, what you're currently doing here and the area that surrounds us. We want to understand the context, so we talked to a lot of folks. Town hall meetings are an opportunity to hear from a broader community, ask questions, understand some of your concerns, and understand what needs you perceive the community has for a Center for the Arts and what component parts might be. Then along with Theater DNA, Michael Ferguson, we've also distributed an e-survey to cultural organizations with really detailed understanding of what the needs are, stage dimensions and dressing room sizes and number of adjunct facilities, that sort of thing, lobby space and theater equipment, what's needed. So we get a really good picture of the details that are involved with the Center for the Arts, because it's not just four walls, it's all the stuff that goes inside. So that's part of our community engagement process. The town hall meetings are really designed to hear your concerns, your questions, your enthusiasm, your aspirations for the community, understanding what the needs are from a broad cross-section of folks, not just the cultural sector, but also the citizens of Hoover and the surrounding area. We really want to understand what you really want here in the community. I know that you have some great facilities for sports, but we've heard often about the lack of cultural facilities. We know that the school district has some facilities, but this is going to take the place of all of those facilities for the performing arts and the arts. So I've posed some questions. These may be questions that you have. They're not the only questions you might have. I'd like to open up the discussion. And as you ask questions or make comments, could you please state your name and where you live? That would be helpful for us to notate. So does anybody have any questions, or do you want to discuss any of these questions? Okay, we'll start right here, sir. Well, we think it's going to be a programming mix, a multidisciplinary kind of mix of programs, music, dance, and theater, and community organizations using the space, dance, and other organizations that already reside in the community, as well as a curated program, a presented program. So it's a wide mix of different kinds of programming options. I think in order for it to be successful and operate successfully, it has to be a diverse kind of programming mix.
So let me give you some examples, like dance recitals, like they have at the Civic Center downtown. Is that something we could do?
Certainly.
Okay. What? How many seats in the main theater are you considering?
We're looking at a range of seats, somewhere between 800 and 1,200 seats right now. We're doing the analysis. We don't have a firm number, but that's sort of the range we're looking at. Would you agree, Michael?
Yeah.
Yeah. You think it's a good size? Which one, the 800 or the 1,200?
In order to get some of the programming that you want, you don't want to be too small. But then on the other hand, 1,200 is probably still, you know, with a good range for what else is going on in town with some of the other theaters and whatnot, where we can compete with like the Lyric Theater or some of those other places where we can bring some of the shows that are going there out to Hoover. And I think that's, I'm assuming one of the goals we want is to be able to bring some of those great programs that are down there.
I think so. Yeah, I think that when we look at the context of this Center for the Arts in Hoover, we look at the entire area, what might be missing, what are the competitive market dynamics. But you also have this theater here, this 250-seat theater. We don't want to replicate that. So this theater with a 1,200-seat theater would be a nice kind of package for the community, I think. Yes.
Like musical acts and other types of acts that we have to promote it?
I think rentals are certainly part of the mix. We're not really the programmers. We're not really the operators of the theater. That will be determined by those folks. But I think in order for it to be successful, it has to have not only curated programs, which are presented by the theater, community programs that are rented, and maybe promoters and maybe commercial activities as well, of course. I don't think that's off the table. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Susan DeBose. I live in Graceton. I'm in house 45. That's how. I have a question about the school systems being able to use this facility, because I know that the theaters at both Spain Park and Hoover High School are really inadequate, very small for that size. Would the students be able to use this for, and would they be able to, would they have to rent it? Would they get it for free? What would their benefit be?
I don't know
And
if they would get it
Victor?
for free.
Victor, if
Yes.
I may just jump in one moment and request
Yep.
if you would kindly just briefly summarize the question, because we can kind of hear in the virtual, but it's a little bit faint. Thanks.
Thanks, Teresa. So the question was, would the Hoover School District school system have access to these performance spaces? Could the students use them? And would there be a charge, or would they be offered for free? And I was saying I doubt it would be offered for free, but that's possible depending on the relationship. I think that the community would use the space. And when I'm talking to the community, I'm talking about the school district as well, even though they have their own spaces. Calendars are very difficult to coordinate if you're doing a broad mix of things. It really depends on availability of time on the calendar. Theater productions take the most time on stage because you rehearse, you put a set on stage, and that stays there for a long time. But certainly band concerts, dance recitals, that sort of thing by the students would be certainly appropriate and probably available depending on the calendar availability. Yes. The question was, are we considering a location, a specific site, or is it an existing building that we're looking at? It hasn't gotten that far. Maybe I'll turn it over to either Michael or Matt to talk about site location. That's not really our purview. Any comments?
Haven. Sorry, thank you for the online folks. So repeat that quickly. So at this point, we have more questions than answers. So what we've done so far is identify zones in the city and try to find places where we think it would be a good fit and a good performing arts environment. And what we mean by that is, as you may imagine, similar to retail, you want visibility, you want lots of parking, you want easy access, all those kinds of things. So the zone that we've identified, I just drove a little bit around where you're at now. And so there's some zones right around this kind of the Galleria, some of the retail zone. Sorry, it's still early for me. I'm from Los Angeles, flew in late last night, and you gave me a microphone. So now it's a comedy show, evidently. So we've essentially are just trying to find out where good fits are and where good fits aren't. And so certainly this downtown zone, there's a lot of hub of activity. We kind of like this zone right now. So we're starting to look at options that would be in this exact zone.
Yes.
Selling anything. Think about touring facility and possibility of revising things. I'll give you another example down by LSD. There's a lot of things, that just need.
No, I think that's a good point, and I think what Michael's saying is true. We're at a point now where we don't know the answer to that, but certainly we'll be looking at all sites that are available. Point is that Hoover doesn't have a real downtown focal point, and this could be this destination. This could be the downtown focal point for the city, and that part of the consideration. But access is another consideration. Parking is certainly consideration, and the size of the facility or the size of the lot is very important to consider as well, depending on the size of the facility ultimately.
Absolutely. And to be specific, we are looking at existing buildings. So we're not just looking for greenfield sites. We're looking for anything that fits, essentially.
And if folks are comfortable
you.
passing around the mic for the questions, that might also help us here in the virtual space hear better. That would be really great.
Please.
Tara Hurd with Bluff Park Art Association Board. Your presentation mentioned stakeholder meetings. How is that determined on who you will, be interviewing from the community?
Well, we've been working with the Arts Alliance and the Arts Council on identifying stakeholders, but we're not done with that yet. We can certainly talk to additional stakeholders. The question was, how do we determine which stakeholders we interview? We are not done with that. So if there are other folks, maybe after this session, you could give me some names.
Okay.
Okay. More questions?
Kathy Storch, a resident of Country Club Highlands. Being at, we're talking about cultural facility, I was wondering, do you anticipate at some point in offering instructions, having classes there also besides just performances?
We know that that's an interest in the community. We've heard from a number of folks about their desire to have a class environment for the visual arts. We're looking at that. It's a possibility. It will determine certain characteristics of the building to accommodate that kind of activity. So it's not off the table, and we understand that there's a need for that. But, you know, a performing arts center is a performing arts center primarily. So this would be adjunct to that. We definitely have the notion of creating visual art space within the building for exhibits and that kind of thing. The teaching is a different kind of space, but we certainly want to include space for exhibits and art installations. Okay.
You talked about the zones, the area that you're kind of looking at. Is that really keeping it on this side of Hoover, like near the Galleria or whatever, not going down where there's so much congestion down towards the Met? I mean, who will make that decision on the area, I guess? Does that fall with who? Okay, but keeping it on this side where we have. Okay.
Right now, we're essentially just identifying and kind of looking around. So since we're not familiar with the area, we just try to make sure we put our heads and eyes into it. And then all of this information will be presented back to the city for a decision, because clearly there's stuff that we wouldn't have information on. So we're really looking at it from our kind of periscope as far as that performing arts aspect.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Susan Groves. I live in Greystone in Hoover. So when you talk about the other side, there's another other side. It's way to the east, much further out than some of the others. But I'm speaking on behalf of the Bluff Park Art Association. I'm currently the vice president. Excuse me, I dropped my notes. So as I was talking with you earlier, we've had this show for 58 years. And for the past 3 or 4 years, we've had to have our show without the use of the community center. It has been condemned. And so this was a place where we had an air-conditioned space to display the pieces that each artist would submit for the judge to judge. And so the judge could just go around and look at all of them and judge it, instead of now having to go through the entire park and look in each booth. And then when they selected the winner, the public could come in and see who won and see the work of all of the artists and say, oh, I love that artist. Let me go find her booth and see what she's done. So we've lost that. And, you know, we've lost the kitchen where we could create refreshments for the artists. We've lost the restrooms. We've lost the room where the judge could deliberate and where we could, you know, store the money securely and that sort of thing. So that has hampered us the last few years. The city is going to replace the center with what we understand will be a pavilion, which will be great for the community, but it won't solve any of our needs. And in addition to that, the city has improved the park by adding sidewalks and parking spaces and things like that. However, that's reduced our space to have artists. So we've gone from 150 down to 130. And by losing those 20 spots, this year we lost $5,300 in revenue. We've had to rent porta potties, which is just about $1,000. And also, because there's no parking for a large number of people who come to the show, we have to use the parking lots of churches nearby. And we rent school buses and pay the drivers. And this year that cost us $6,300. all that to say that we basically don't make a profit from our show. We do not charge the patrons to come. We don't charge them to ride the buses. It's always been a free event. Part of our mission is to make art available to homes and the community and the schools. And one of the benefits of this show is that the artists get to display and sell their work, and our community gets to come and actually interact with the artist and buy their works. I know personally it means a lot to talk with the artist when you're buying their work. So what we're really here today asking for is to consider having a space for visual arts. We would love to be able to have a spot to put 150 tents, be it a parking lot or inside a room somewhere, to park our patrons and our artists and food trucks, and to have restrooms, and to have a meeting room where we could have our monthly board meetings, and all the other organizations in Hoover could also have their meetings, you know, just have that available for us. Let's see, what have I forgotten? What? What did I forget? Oh, yes. We have a permanent collection of art. Each year, the winner of our show gets a large cash prize. We give about $10,000 in cash prizes to our artists, and the winner gets a large cash prize, and we purchase the piece that wins. So we have a permanent collection of about 200 pieces, I think. Is that right? And we have no place to display it. We do have some that we display in the city buildings, in the libraries, and in the schools. But we have many, many pieces that are just in storage. We would love to have a place to be able to display that so that the community could take advantage of all these beautiful pieces of painting and sculptures and pottery and textiles and all the things that we have. So we very much would like to be a part of making this become a reality for the city of Hoover. We have so many amenities here, and we think this would be an excellent addition to help bring businesses and residents to the community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask one follow-up question?
Yeah.
How big are the tents? 10 by 10s? Okay, I didn't want to assume. Okay, thank you so much.
That's helpful. I think, you know, we'll follow up with your board, have a one-on-one with you guys. Other questions?
Winnie Cooper, Regent Forest, off of the I-65. In addition to what the lady said about the Bluff Park Association, I'm hoping whatever facility that you do build will have plenty of exhibition space year-round for rotating exhibits from the different art groups, etc. And also, besides the meeting rooms for art groups, that we have those meeting rooms or similar for continuing art education classes. Those would be very valuable to so many of us, and probably could be some profit in it to the facility. There are so many different facilities around the state. I'm so glad that you all are planning on this facility for Hoover. It's almost overdue. I applaud all of the sports facilities that we have, but we need this art center so badly for so many different avenues of arts in the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question about the facility. Do we have any idea of a range of how many square feet? How big would this facility be? I know you don't know exactly, but we're looking at 15,000 square feet, 30,000 square feet? How big of an area are we talking about?
It's a little bit of a how long is a piece of string question. So my question back would be, is what question are you really trying to ask? As opposed to how big is it? So it's probably somewhere between 40,000 square feet, 50,000 square feet. Don't know. So we're trying to figure that out now. Part of that'll be driven by site availability.
Mhm.
Part of that'll be driven by the seat count, which is a really big driver. As you may imagine, when you have a audience of 800 people, then you have a lobby for 800 people and bathrooms for 800 people, so they can all use the restroom during a 15-minute intermission. So if you go to 1,200 seats, that's 50% bigger.
Of
So
course.
part of
So-
that'll be about money as well, funding.
So if we have 8 to 1,200 seats, we have a nice production stage. Now, what you were bringing up is that wouldn't be the exhibition space. So in addition to that, we would have like a square box, so to speak, where we could do exhibitions and they could go around, and where maybe we could do the Bluff Park Art Show, which, by the way, I go to every year, and which is a wonderful thing. But one thing, let me just bring, in the meantime, for the art show, have you considered using the Finley Center, where you have all of that, you have all the parking and all the other things you need until this is ready? I mean, I love going to the park, but if there's problems there, the Finley Center has that big facility, all the rooms, everything you need, plus the park.
If I could, I think it might be good to focus on this project as opposed to
Okay,
that. But if
absolutely.
you guys can connect afterwards, it sounds like there's a match made in heaven. So the other thing I'll ask, which I'll say, which I thought of when you were talking about your permanent exhibition, sometimes we spend a lot of time and energy on building buildings, and then we get to the end of it and they say, holy Toledo, we got to come up with another $1 million, $2 million to put something beautiful in the lobby. So clearly public spaces are where we want to adorn and celebrate the community, especially in a building like this where it's really about the community. So it seems like a lovely conversation to have, that if we have this local art and can celebrate that in a local building. And so that's obviously kind of a win-win, because now we found double duty for a space that needs to hold 1,000 people for a 7 o'clock show, but now it can hold 500 people in a gallery type setting in the middle of the day before that show happens. So that's a kind of a good natural fit that we find quite often between performing arts and visual arts.
The other thing I would say, in terms of all the component parts of a building, ultimately it really comes down to not only the site selected, but also the cost. You know, is the capital cost within the range of doability for the community, and how many component parts are added to make that work? Then the operational aspect of it is another factor. How much does it cost to operate on an annual basis, all this space to, for custodial services, utilities, all of that is also another factor that we look at. So there's a lot of different moving parts. We understand the need and what you're looking for. Whether we can accommodate all of that, I'm not quite sure yet. And we're working on that. There's a question down here.
I'm Frank Raby from the Willow Lakes subdivision. Your first question is, does Hoover need an arts and cultural facility? What was the charge presented to you? I mean, arts and culture can be any number of things. I bet everybody in the room has a different definition. So what was the charge to you as you're looking at designing a facility? Does it include museum space? Does it, exhibition space? Or is it a performing arts center, meaning?
Performing Arts Center.
So it's only really, you're talking about a stage and dance and
We are, but as Michael has pointed out, some of the public spaces are certainly appropriate for visual arts exhibitions. So
Yeah,
that could be included too, but it's a performing arts center.
but a temporary
Or
exhibition
it could be
space.
permanent installation, it could be a revolving exhibit. It could be in a number of different ways.
Because, talking on in favor of the Bluff Park Art Association, they're 58 years or, approaching 60 years. Their permanent collection tells the history of Hoover and arts in Hoover just by its exhibit. It needs to be seen by people so they can understand how art has progressed historically in this city.
Understood. Thank you. Microphone is moving.
Hard. Hi, Rana Phillips from Bluff Park. You've talked about a range for seating between 800 and 1,200. Could you give us just a frame of reference as to what that compares to that already exists? Is that comparable to the Civic Center Concert Hall, or is that more like the Lyric or the Alabama Theater? Does anybody know? All right, and then second question, while I have the mic, assuming, given that this is a focus on performing arts, will the theater stage be a sprung stage? And I assume you know what I mean.
Yes. So the stage actually will be a resilient stage made appropriate for most forms of dance and repetitive movement. It's not what we would call a sprung stage, which is more of what I would call a stage specifically for ballet. So ballet can happen on the resilient floor and not cause injury. And then there's, as you know, a surface that goes on the top, like a vinyl surface, a marley or a vinyl floor for specific for dance. So that's a real detailed thing, but that's the kind of assumption that we make. So if we know and think that there'll be dance in the room, then we specifically do that for the floor, put that in as loose equipment, because part of the answer to kind of second and reinforce what Victor said, I suspect, as I've said, I say quite often, I've yet to work on a project that has been overfunded. So what that really means is probably the final lens to this will come down to money. So if anybody brought your checkbooks, I can take the checks, I'll figure out who to make them out to, but money will always be the driving factor in this thing. So as you heard us talk a little bit earlier about the difference between an 800 seat theater and a 1,200 seat theater, the stage is probably the same size for each of those, but that auditorium is 50% bigger. So the final answer for this will come down to really specific things. And now I'm dipping my toe into Victor's pool a little bit, but there will be a ticket price that you all will either pay or not pay. And so that's part of this. Will you pay $180 to go see a normal show? Probably not. So there's going to be a sweet spot for ticket price. And when you understand how much you pay for a ticket or willing to pay or can pay, then that tells you how much money you can make every time you have a show. Well, the difference between 800 seats and 1,200 seats is 50% more income. So all of those things start to matter. It also matters kind of in a seasonal approach, because as we've said, one of those shows may be for the local high school, which you're not going to charge tickets. And one may be a commercial endeavor where you're trying to make money. So all of those things kind of roll into a big mix and turn into revenue. And then all of that will end up being about how much the building costs to run. And then all of that actually has nothing to do with how much it costs to get there in the first place. So all of that will come into play on this at some point before we're done.
Just to give you some context about seating capacities, you asked that question. So you're in 250 seats right now, or approximately 250 seats right now. Elise Stevens Center at UAB, the concert hall is 1,300 seats. So a little bit larger than what we're talking about. They also have facilities that range from 350 seats to 164 seats. So it's a range, but Elise Stevens, I think, would be a good example of the 1,200 seater. That's about the size.
Yes, and also the Oxford is about 1,200 and the Lyric is about 750. So that's like another good range. And then I just have one question here from the chat. Is that okay, Victor?
Please go ahead, Teresa.
Great. So the question is, are the schools in HCS being prioritized as a group that will be able to use the facility? And are the school leaders and or fine arts teachers being interviewed and consulted with as stakeholders? And I'll just answer part of that question, and then I'll turn it over to you, Victor, if you have more to add. But we did, I believe there was a survey that went around not long ago that consulted with a lot of the teachers at the schools and the art teachers specifically about what some of their needs are. And we've been given that information to help us in our work. So that certainly has been. And then if there's more, and what's great about these town hall conversations is that part of this is about kind of uncovering who else we need to speak with and how to make sure that we're bringing in everyone into the fold and making sure all voices are being heard. So certainly, as an answer to this question, if there's more folks that we should reach out to, this is a really great way to help alert us of that. And then in terms of prioritizing the schools, that is a great conversation to have as well in terms of what those needs would be. We are here to help plan and make a forum so that those kind of partnerships can come forward. And yeah, Victor, do you have any other ideas or thoughts about that? I know there was another question earlier that in this call that
Yeah, there was a
spoke to
question
that.
earlier, yeah, about school access, and I think that's certainly appropriate and should be part of the mix. You know, you want the building to be as busy as possible. You know, a dark theater is not a very profitable theater, so you want it to have a lot of activity. And I would imagine with the local organizations, the school district, the curated program, you could have in excess of 200 use days a year, which is really what you're looking for. So it is part of the mix. I think it's part of the leadership decision ultimately when the building is open and operated. There's another question up here first before we get here.
Oh, I was just going, the last question, could you answer it?
I'm asking you whether there's another facility in the world that you aspire to, that you think is a good example for us to look at in terms of benchmarking. Have you been to a facility that you particularly love that you would like to share with us? The Alice Stevenson? Well, we like it too. I think Michael and I worked on that project. So. The Alabama Theater. Yeah. Thank you. Question here.
The Lyric Theater earlier, and I was there recently for something, but they have those little box seats. Anybody's been there? And they're just impractical. I mean, I know we probably wouldn't add something like that, but I watch people literally move from those seats to other seats. So if y'all been, I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but you know, good seats is a good requirement. You know, I was at Sanford last night for a program, and the seats there, which I love Sanford, but they sit so low to the floor. Everybody's been, your knees are up because they sit very low, and it's just an older facility, but comfortable seats, I guess, is a good.
We agree with that very much. And good sight lines and the ability to hear, all those things are really important to us.
And if you get to the theater in Hoover and it doesn't have all those things, you can blame him for that. Yes.
I'm Tracy True Dismukes. I'm in the Birch Tree area. I have actually a son in the performing arts at Hoover High School, both in band and choir. And just to address the Hoover High School theater is tiny, but we are in the works of getting the Performing Arts Center there, and that will seat around 900 and something. So that should offload some of those performances that we wouldn't be able to charge as much for from this facility. And then on that last question, the Arts Center, there's one Auburn Opelika area performing arts center that was might be worth looking at as well.
Thank you. There's a question all to the last row up there. Oh. Red Skelton Performing Arts Center in Indiana. Okay, thank you.
Since he brought the thing up about the money being sensitive, is there a budget that went in to add to the program you're doing? And if so, where is the original money coming in? Is it coming from taxpayers, grants? How do we fund it?
We don't have a budget in mind. We have to do all this work first. Michael will develop a space program with square foot dimensions, and that will be costed with the architect's help. And then we'll have a price tag. We don't have a budget at this point. Correct. We're not aware of any facility that supports itself. There's, you know, it's a reality. So what usually happens is that we'll develop a budget, an operating budget. This is after this building is built. We'll develop an operating budget, take into consideration all the revenue sources. all the expenses in operations. And if there's a shortfall between revenue and expenses, that has to be covered either with an endowment money or fundraising effort on an annual basis, which is typical. Facilities always fundraise from the community. But, you know, it would be best if there was an endowment that you could take the interest off of on an annual basis to cover the shortfall between expenses and revenues. But you're right, they don't make money traditionally, even with all the revenue sources possible. It's still going to require either underwriting or fundraising.
And to answer the first part of the question, currently, and it's convenient for us to say as we're sitting in front of you today, but the funding part of that is not part of our study. So right now, we're just trying to figure out how long that piece of string is. And then we'll turn that over to city leadership. And then that's when that conversation starts to happen.
But we will give the city an idea of what it will cost to operate on an annual basis. Actually, we'll give it a 3 to 5 year span of operational costs.
Hi, Rana again. This is more of a comment than a question. I've had the privilege to travel much of the world and go to many performing arts centers. One that I'll comment on is the one in Reykjavik, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is just stunning. So one of the things that grabs my attention when I travel is those facilities that are eyesores, maybe well thought out and creative, but don't fit. When I think of the Stevens Center, it fits beautifully. UAB is red brick, but it makes Southside beautiful. And you know where UAB is, and you know that the Stevens Center is part of UAB. Whereas the difference with the Reykjavik facility, and if any of y'all aren't familiar with it, I would encourage you to look it up. In Iceland, it's award-winning and stunning. And so it doesn't fit, but it's so stunning that it makes the city. It becomes a visual landmark for the city. And so my vote would be one or the other, but not something in between. So just a comment for the architects.
It's a good
Thank you.
comment. The architects are here. They're taking notes. So context is very important. And, you know, you want to develop some kind of iconic structure that would be a draw and an allure, a place fun to go to, but certainly representative of the city it resides in. Yes.
What is your timeline for this process?
My process will be done in January,
And then you present it to the city?
presented to the city, but that doesn't include the design process. That's separate.
There'll be an additional probably month or two after that. So once we understand, really, Victor sets the size based on finances and zones and people and population and all that good stuff. Once we understand that sweet spot, then we program the building, meaning come up with a space list that lists literally every single space in the entire building and how big it is and how tall it is. And then once we get done with that, there's a performing arts cost consultant who does nothing but cultural and performing arts buildings. And they will get out their crystal ball, which is a little bit broke these days due to the supply chain issues that we're all very aware of. And they will try to tell us how much they think this thing will cost based on when construction would start. And so they'll usually give us a few options, meaning just because we said we like it and we all had this lovely meeting doesn't mean that it starts overnight. There's processes and planning that have to happen. So that means they'll probably say, well, if you start in a year, then we'll plan on it in a year and we'll escalate the cost out that year or a year and a half or 2 years or whatever the right answer is when we develop that with city leadership.
Thank you.
Correct. Yes. Next month. Have a lot of work to do.
Christmas is next week. I just said that as a reality check for me as well as everyone.
Any other questions, comments? This is your chance. Yes, up at the top.
Primarily something that serves the community, or are you anticipating this as something that will draw from outside of the community and bring people to Hoover?
I think both are probably important. I think you want people to visit Hoover and just, spend some time in the community, go to the restaurants, fill up their car with gas here in the city, and then attend a performing arts event. I think you have an opportunity to attract people from around the area.
Rana again. Just another comment that goes to attendees and cost of tickets and those kinds of issues. We were heartbroken when the Birmingham Barons baseball team moved away from Hoover. We had it easy. I could lay in bed at night and listen to the fireworks and go, oh, game's over, or run down there and grab a hot dog after work. And yet Birmingham City built a beautiful facility and interestingly enough, downsized it, but it packs out. But one of the things that stands out dramatically is that the games in Hoover went from being 98% white attended. Now I would guesstimate 50% white versus minority. And it is a huge blessing to the metropolitan area to have minorities who have access to or feel comfortable with whatever it is that draws them, that are able to go out to those games, attend, have a good time, good, clean, fun, safe. And I would love to see this facility somehow be able to draw minorities to Hoover.
Thank you. One of the great things about the performing arts is that it's a great place for diversity, both in programming and for audience. And I think that it's a natural outcome of a performing arts center is to have a diverse audience and a diverse set of programs. So I appreciate the comment.
Hey, thank you. My name's Ruth Cole and I live out in Greystone. I see this as a facility to kind of augment what we've built with the Finley Center. And so I kind of wanted to say, since we do participate in baseball out there pretty much year round, and we've got a lot of people come in and you play one game a day, there's things you need to fill your time otherwise. I'd love to see some component of this with the, that is something that could be had on a daily basis, but outside of the visual arts, whether I'm not sure how you could do it, but movie screens or something for people to come and make it a little more of a whole experience and on a daily basis, say May through October, November. That would just be my suggestion to make, and where it would be priced where families with multiple members could go affordably go and then have dinner or vice versa.
Great, thank you. That's a great comment.
We have another question in the chat, if now's okay. We have another question in the chat, if now's okay.
Hang on a second, Teresa. We have a question in the house and then we'll turn it over to
great.
you.
Sounds great. Thanks. Oh, yeah, great. Sounds great. Thanks.
Do you have an answer to the question that you posed? Is there another arts center anywhere that is a good example of what might work here in Hoover?
I was really asking you all that question. Do you have one? No? Well, I like Elise Stevens. I like what they've done there, what we've done there. But there's so many different performing arts centers around the country that are really great and appropriate for their communities. I opened one in the Los Angeles County called the Cerritos Center, which I think is a really wonderful space. I live in Los Angeles, so I'm right down the street from the Music Center, which has Dorothy Chandler Pavilion and Disney Concert Hall. I think for me, what makes a great performing arts center is tremendous architecture, really unique architecture, and tremendous functionality. So a place that works really, really well for music, dance, and theater and other arts. And it's combined with a great architectural statement. Those are the great art centers.
Yeah, I'll add it's a hard question that we always ask you guys, and then you notice when you ask us back, we don't have a specific answer. And the reason for that is literally every theater we build is built specifically for that community. So it's a unicorn, you know, with a leprechaun on top jumping over a rainbow. It's completely unique. And I know that sounds funny. We use the same kind of Lego set. It's still going to have a lobby. It's still going to have a auditorium. It's still going to have dressing rooms. All those things are the same, but how they're oriented, how big they are, what the character of it is, what the quality of it is, all that stuff is dependent on that community. So there are definitely some other examples that we draw from, but I can tell you there's not a single one that we would say is exactly like this and we should do that again, because there's going to be something about it that either doesn't work with your summer climate or something that doesn't work with how close you are to downtown Birmingham and the way that the communities are very close but still want to kind of have their own performing arts center. I can tell you, Victor mentioned Los Angeles. It's actually, and I'm sorry to do this to you, it's very similar to Los Angeles in theory, which is if you're in downtown Los Angeles, where Victor and I actually both live, and you happen to go to Orange County, if you were driving that on a normal day with no traffic, it would take you 20 minutes, 25 minutes. If you're driving it in traffic, it's going to take you an hour. So what that means is you would never in your lifetime think that you're going to get off work, go have dinner or go home and change, and then be back for a 7 or an 8 o'clock show in downtown LA. You wouldn't do it. So we end up building performing arts centers that are 30 and 40 miles apart. And you look at it on a map and it makes no sense whatsoever. But when you realize how long it literally time it takes you to get there. So I know I've been coming to Birmingham for 15 years and working on projects all around this area. The traffic has changed in 15 years, right? So now those things start to become a little more of a consideration. So the other thing is, you know, a performing arts center is really one of those things that a community starts to develop when they get to a certain maturity and they get to a point where they're proud of what they do and they want to celebrate that. And they're happy to drive someplace else and celebrate that, but it's time for them to maybe stay closer to home. So I think that kind of feels like where you guys are in the development of your city. And you certainly have things that you've been celebrating for decades. So that's why it may be that, you know, this is really specific to you and how you guys want to do your stuff. And maybe there's more art component because that's the right thing for the community. Maybe there's, you know, different accommodations in the parking lot because we know we want to put up 150 tents once a year to do this piece. I mean, all these things are what we put in the top of the hopper and just sift it. And then when it comes out at the bottom, will be the thing that's made just for you guys.
Now I would just add, and I'll turn it over to Teresa. I would just add that the building itself is one thing, but the program that exists within the building, it should be representative of the community and what the community needs and wants and desires. And it should be this mix of things that are a reaction to the community and a reflection of the community. So it's program and building. Teresa, you had a question?
Yeah, and actually, I think it's kind of great, Michael, you unintentionally answered it. The question is, why do you think a metropolitan area of just over a million can support two major centers?
I think Michael did answer that. You can go
And just to be clear, do we know what the first major center is? Would that be at UAB?
I don't have that answer to that, but that's a good question.
So
yeah, go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. So I think what I would say is certainly would be a different character than that. The other part is when you Victor and I know this both well, having run and operated and worked in buildings. When it comes down to it, there's only like 3 weekends a year that every single person wants, right? And then everything else is compromise. So what that means is a city of 1 million people, you add up all the high schools, the colleges, the dance schools, you know, just interest in everything from world music, classical music, country music, hip hop, you go down the whole line. There's only 200 kind of nights a year, as Victor said earlier. So are there more than 200 events a year in a city of 1 million people? So you start to think of it that way and you think, well, certainly there could be 300 or 400. Well, then there you go. You've doubled it. And now you need 2 places to do all that same stuff.
And
so
we also heard from folks that we talked to here that staying in the community to experience performing arts events is really a desire of a lot of the residents. They don't want to travel downtown to downtown Birmingham or to other communities because of the traffic situation that Michael mentioned. So something in your backyard is a little bit more attractive and easier to accommodate for the residents here. And you will bring people from the outside, but for the residents here, I think it's an easier ask.
We also don't want to pay for parking in downtown Birmingham. I'm just saying.
More questions? Yes, we're here.
I'm Sandra Fuller, and I am a Hoover resident. I have a comment about the Auburn Arts Center, Performing Arts Center. Basically, it is a wonderful theater, but I've been there and toured all the way through it, and I think that it is a very good example of a theater that tries to accommodate the people who are performing. They have dressing rooms and makeup rooms, and they have casual leisure rooms for groups that are coming in. And I think that was, to me, it was very impressive. And the one thing, though, that made more sense than anything to me was a stage that was in an alcove on the outside of the building, facing a very large park, grassed. They had areas that on that stage that would accommodate any type of production. Basically, they did have it, though, for music productions with bands and singers and that. And the outside was mostly, I think they could accommodate like 3 or 4 times what they could on the inside. And that also is a very good example of having a space that you could have diversity and inclusion, and people could of any kind could come, throw their blanket out, bring their lawn chairs, and it was slightly elevated so that you could see they had spaces for handicap. And I just think it was a wonderful inclusion in that building.
Right.
And I'd like for you to investigate that building closely and see what they have included.
Okay, we'll look at that.
But in my estimation, looking there, I felt that their theater was small compared to all the things that they had to support a production.
Yeah, so we're very familiar with that facility, and our Victor and I both used to work for the company that did that facility, so we're very aware with the people and the methodology, if you will. One of the big differences between a theater that supports pedagogy or education and one that's a community theater would be those kinds of, where you said maybe it feels like there's more back of house than there is stage. Victor and I both worked on a project at the University of Notre Dame that had a stage that was the same size as Radio City Music Hall, but the auditorium was this big. So the reason for that is because they were teaching that and they could only get this many people to come see the show. So a little bit different. So, but to answer the question in a different way, or say it's a different statement, the whole trick with this whole game is right sizing, meaning it's not too big and it's not too little. So that's kind of where Victor and I have to use our crystal balls and really take all this input in and then understand best practices, peer institutions, all the different things you want to do, understand the future of technology, the future of how things in performing arts are going, and then boil all that into a building. And then that's really where we don't want to have too many dressing rooms. We don't want to have too few dressing rooms. I can tell you in facilities like yours will be, one of our goals is to try to figure out how to make one space work or do 2 or 3 or 4 different things. So as an example, there was a request for a meeting room. That might also work for an educational room. That might also be what we would call in a performing arts environment, a VIP meet and greet room, meaning you paid extra and you want to have the artist come and you want to say hello to them, and you pay extra to do that. There are other buildings that we've worked on that have 3 different rooms for those 3 different things. This is likely the kind of space, just because again, we're not overfunded and don't have too much space. That's the kind of space where we would love to see that thing used in the morning for a coffee, meeting, at lunch for some kind of board meeting, in the afternoon for a yoga stretch class, and then that night is the meet and greet room. So just to give you another finer point on that. So what that means to us as a programmer is that we may actually program that room with 3 or 4 closets, which would make no sense to any normal room. But if each of those closets can be locked, and that stores the stuff for meetings, and that stores the stuff for yoga, and that stores the stuff for Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, then that's kind of how we're able to make that all work and have it all flip around and have it not turn into one closet with 12 people's stuff in it and locks and cages and lockers and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of in the weeds, but those are the kinds of considerations. So everything we're hearing here today, we're absorbing, and all of this will end up being reflected back in this program in some way.
All right, once again, I'm Bruce Ayers from the Stardome. I've been in the entertainment business for 40 years, and everything that I'm hearing to me sounds really good. But here's my question. I think what it's going to boil down to, I have no doubt that you guys are going to build a beautiful building, a beautiful facility. It's going to be sized right. And let's just say that all of that is perfect. And we wouldn't be doing this unless it was. But here's the next step. The next step is, okay, we got this beautiful box. Who's going to run it? Who's going to teach them how to run it? Because what's going to happen, what's going to determine whether or not you're going to go to your first show, and what kind of experience did you have? How were you treated when you went there? How did everything look? How did it feel? How was the concession stand? You're going to be judged on everything from the time you get out of the car till the time you walk back, every single thing. So the running of it is extremely important. Not only that, it's dealing with the performers. Each different group of performers are going to have different needs. If it's like my daughter's, goes to dance recitals, they're going to have one thing. So what we want to be is we want to be the best for them. So the next time that Birmingham Dance Theater wants to do something, hey, I want to come here. But it's going to take training. It takes time. And what are we going to do to train these people and to teach these people? The same thing when we start doing, some of the bigger shows, either big time comedian or big time band. How are they treated? Because they all talk. So we want to get the reputation. This is the place to go, but it takes experience. It takes time. It takes people. What are we thinking of as far as who's going to train all these people? Who's going to teach them the culture of what we want in our performing arts center?
Well, part of our job is to develop a governance and staffing structure to identify the staff positions that are going to be required and the expertise that goes into those staff positions. Nationally, there's experts out there that run facilities like this that have that kind of experience that don't require a mentorship or teaching of what they're doing. You have expertise in the community already. So I don't think it's an issue that we could find the right people to make this place operate on a very high professional level. And I think you're right. It's going to require that. You're going to spend all this money on the building. You want it to run properly with professional staff. So that includes staff for front of house. It includes staff at the stage. It includes administrators. It includes business people. It includes box office people. It includes all of that. That's part of what the expenses are assigned to as the staffing costs, because these places require expertise and professional experience. And you have some of that already in the community, but you're probably going to have to do national searches.
Because right now, the hardest thing is staffing. For places like this, my place, every restaurant, and who knows what's going to be 2 years down the road, but I think that's going to be a big challenge for us.
There's a tremendous allure to new facilities and opening a facility. Staff, people around the country look at that quite favorably. It's a great position, career move to have. So I think at the outset, you're not going to have that much of a problem identifying folks. It also depends on salary, obviously. But.
I'm curious how many of the folks in this room have been attendees at the performances here at the Hoover Library Theater. Just to Mr. Ayers' comment, this is a world-class theater run by impeccable professionals. We have the director with us, who I'd love to promote to be in charge of our new Performing Arts Center, because she and they do a fabulous job. So just saying, we do have talent here among us.
It's really amazing what happens in this space. So I concur. Other questions, comments? Well, then Michael and the architects take that information, start developing the space program. There's an analysis of all of that information, and there's a better sense of what it might cost. Then you move forward step by step. This is a multi-year process, ultimately, before the building happens. So it's going to take a little bit of time after the January time period, but we're going to give you a snapshot of what the operations might look like, what it's going to require, what kind of space we're talking about, and how much it would cost to operate on an annual basis actually for the future. Michael takes that information and develops a space program with all the different bits and pieces. Each room is really identified for its purpose, square footage, and then that goes to the architect and the cost consultant, and on we go. Site is selected, things like that. It's really in the city's hands at that point.
May I ask about the Galleria? I had heard that they were going to revamp that into maybe a performing arts center. The location would be excellent. You got plenty of parking. But I know you have to contend with the owners, but I don't know about anybody else, but I've noticed that a lot of the stores are empty, and I know COVID is part of the problem, but that would be a ideal location, I would think. But then my question is, I kind of gather from the architects that they would rather build something new and then to have to revamp an older structure with the possible problems.
We certainly didn't say that here today, so I'm not sure. We should make no assumptions, as always in life. That's okay. So yeah, no, we're just looking at zones right now. So we think that there's certainly some synergy in putting it next to retail and restaurant. Most new developments any place else in the world outside of the United States have essentially RDE districts, which means retail, dining, and entertainment. They almost require that all three of those things be built at the same exact time because they understand the synergy. So it's a well-known, documented fact that the arts drive the economic, can drive the economy when they plop down in a zone. And it's not just about the ticket sales, but it's also about, the stuff that happens before and after the show. So in addition to stopping and getting gas, they're having dinner, all that good stuff. And then, as you guys know, it's just once they get exposed to something, it creates, more and more synergy. Everywhere in the world, including the United States, these kind of single destinations where you can park and kind of spend all day. And if it's a really nice place, maybe you're outside part of the day and walking around, and you can, especially at Christmas time, you can spend all day there and not leave. So I think that's why we're attracted to these retail zones. So we don't have any specifics yet of where it would be and how it would work. But if part of that did include an existing building, then our first question would be, does it fit with the space program? So part of I'm a fan of saying the absence of adversity is the enemy of creativity. So we don't look at renovations as things that put limitations on us. We actually think it just kind of ramps up the creativity, and you can end up with something even more special when you have those limitations. Same with the budget. Just because we may have less money than we could have doesn't necessarily mean it has to be less good or less exciting or less serve the community less. It just means we have to be more creative with those dollars. So I think right now it's all an open book. We have no feelings one way or the other.
We have a few more minutes. Any other questions, comments?
Thanks. Since our mayor is here, I wonder if we could hear some preliminary thoughts on what the funding sources are that are being considered or looking to be recruited.
Well, there are a couple of things I want to address. We really are focused, and we've talked about a performing arts center for many years in our city. And we did town hall meetings earlier when I was elected to kind of get an idea of what people wanted in the city. And that was one of the number one things that we heard. And it's certainly been one of the number one priorities that I have focused on as well. And so we're talking about a performing arts center. We want a state-of-the-art, a beautiful building that people will be pleased to come to from all around the metropolitan area. But we're also using it as an opportunity for revitalization in what we know as downtown Hoover now. So that footprint that they're talking about is from City Hall to probably Patton Creek. We're looking, not saying that that's absolutely the only place it could go, but we are focused on using the Performing Arts Center as a catalyst to revitalization along that corridor. In terms of funding, number one, we don't know what it's going to cost. The city will most definitely be the biggest contributor, but we will go after private dollars from donors, much like the Alice Stevens Center does, much like they do at Sanford. It will be that kind of operation as well that we believe our citizens will want to contribute to it and make sure that it's well funded and well run and something that we can be very, very proud of. And then the other thing, Bruce, that you mentioned about bringing professionals in here to run it. Well, we did that with, we've got wonderful city employees and they run the fire department very well, and they run the police department very well, and they run the library and this theater, all of those things. We have those folks here. But with let's look at the Finley Center, an $80 million investment that the city invested in some 5-6 years ago. But we went outside to an organization that is running that for us now, that knows that business inside and out. And I would not be surprised if that's the approach that we take with this facility. Don't know that. There's a lot of information that we are gathering, that these folks are gathering for us so that we can make some really positive and good decisions. But I can say, I feel very comfortable in saying that the city council, myself, we are all pushing in the same direction for something that our citizens in Hoover, we're 90,000 people now just in our city. And so it's the Birmingham Hoover metropolitan area. There's no reason that Birmingham has to provide everything for the metropolitan area. We're large enough, and I think that our citizens demand those types of venues as well, that we can do some of those things, and we want to do those things. And I believe that the facility that you see that I hope will be built, I said December of 2022. They corrected me really quick when I said that. So I pushed it out a year and said December 2023.
That's better.
That might be. So we hope that it's by then. But I think it's going to be something that, just like the Finley Center, we see people come from all over the country to the Finley Center and all over the metropolitan area, and they are absolutely just shocked at what an incredible. And it's a big gym building, but the things that we do there and the customer service that we provide, we're so good at that. The SEC tournament is still here in Hoover, Alabama for one reason and one reason only: the customer service provided by the employees in the city of Hoover and the citizens of Hoover that support it. That's the number one reason that is here. So we'll do some of the same things. Hope that answered whoever asked that question.
Thank you, Mayor. Anything else? Well, I want to thank you for participating today. The information has been extremely helpful for us to hear, and I hope you learned something as well. I want to take a moment just to thank Tina and her staff for pulling this all together logistically and technologically, and the virtual hookup and all of that. Thank you, Martina. Thanks, Scott and Elin. I got it right. And thank you all for coming. We're not going anywhere. If you have any follow-up questions, please let us know. We'll be following up with some of you folks to do some one-on-one interviews, and have a great day and happy holidays.
Thank you all very much.